Call this meeting to order, and we'll begin by doing a roll call. Lothar is here. George Gamak.
Here.
Ken Gunther.
Here.
Manoj Thomas.
Here.
Jim Tilbury.
Here.
And Phil Christensen. I do not hear from Phil, so hopefully he'll be able to join us. So I invite you to join me and stand, and I think Brad has the flag, and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So, do we have any requests to amend the agenda for the evening, or will it stand as such? Any input from any of you? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Anyone have?
I will so move.
Okay, Ken, and do I have a second?
Ken second.
Ken second, thank you. I see Phil is here. Welcome, Phil.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I had a little trouble logging in.
That we kind of figured that, no problem. We just completed the pledge and approved the agenda for the evening. And do we have anybody here for open forum?
Mr. Chair, actually, we need a roll call vote on the approval of the agenda.
Okay, thank you for that. So do I have a motion to approve? We have that, so let's get a roll call here on that. Lothar, aye. Gamak.
Aye.
Gunther.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Tilbury.
Aye.
And Christensen.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll move forward to open forum. And Jess, do we have anybody that wants to speak on open forum?
Thank you for asking, Chair Lothar. At this time, no one's raised their hand, but if anyone would like to speak at open forum, they can do so by pressing *9 on their phone. Otherwise, they can click the participant tab and click on the raise the hand function. But at this time, no one is currently raising their hand.
You can give it a few seconds. Okay. Seeing no raised hands, we will move forward to the approval of the minutes, and we actually have an updated minutes that are not part of our package here because of some clerical errors. I'm just going to have Jessica cover those before we do the approval of the minutes here.
Ryan, we also have the minutes for November 25th, 2019. We could probably do them separately.
Sure. So do you want to cover the clerical errors first, and then we'll approve both of these? Or will Jessica?
Sure. Give me just one moment here.
Okay.
So the clerical errors in the Charter Commission minutes, really there were errors just in the spelling of one of the commissioners' last names, and there was a tweak to a couple of the motions as there were some additional people present. So generally, no motions changed or none of the actions changed, just those minor
Clerical errors.
Clerical errors.
Do we need an approval or a motion to approve those changes?
I think we could go ahead and do so by just noting the accepting the clerical changes and approving the minutes.
Okay, great. So everybody's fine with these clerical changes, I'm assuming? Okay, great. So I want to entertain then a motion to approve the minutes of the November 25th, 2019 meeting. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Motion by Gamak, second by Tilbury. All in favor, Lothar, aye. Christensen,
Aye.
Gamak,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
Tilbury.
Just 1 second. Technically, I believe that if you weren't there, you probably should just abstain. I think that's been the direction of city council minute approvals in the past. Brad, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's been past practice, I would say. Legally, it's fine, but correct. The past practice has been typically if you haven't been on, or especially if you weren't on the group at that time. Now, that being said, for example, the first meeting of the city council in January is going to have to approve the minutes of, the December meeting that they weren't a part of. So it's one of those things whenever you can. It's not a technical requirement.
Yeah, we're not gonna penalize him for offering to do anything about it.
Well, knowing how detailed Manoj is, I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone back and
There he is.
confirmed all of these.
I would actually confirm and support Brad's representation there, because technically, it's my recollection, under Robert's rules, you need not have been present at the meeting to participate in approval of the minutes.
Okay.
And frankly, it's not, well, I can go into it at length, but because for the very reason that Brad mentioned, the new council is going to have to approve the past minutes.
Right. I think it would be a stickier wicket if Manoj would have said nay on that instead of aye. So did we get everybody?
Yes.
Okay, all right,
Nay.
good.
Yep.
And so then I'd like to make a motion then to approve the minutes of our most recent meeting on November 12th on 2020, which was the joint work session between the Charter Commission and the City Council. Do I have a motion to approve that?
Can we take a vote on the other one first? Take a vote on the one that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought
I believe we did through the.
I thought we did.
Yeah, that was through the roll call.
Yeah, I thought we did.
Okay, sorry.
All right. No, that's okay. Thanks, George. It's always good for many voices to keep me on my toes and keep me on track. So then do we have a motion then to approve the most recent meeting, November 12th, 2020, the joint work session with the City Council?
Ken moves approval.
Ken Gunther makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Gamak, second. Again, all in favor. Lothar, aye. Christensen,
I'll abstain. That makes sense.
Gamak,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
Tilbury.
Aye.
Thank you. Now to unfinished business, we have none at this juncture. And
Mr. Chair, I apologize to break in. Oh, never mind. We're good. Sorry, I apologize.
that's right. You can break in anytime. Okay. I'm used to it. So, new business. So we want to review any correspondence that we've had through this year. And I don't believe we actually received any. Is that correct, Jess and Brad?
That is correct. I'm not aware of any correspondence.
Okay. And so then I believe we had a printout on the commissioner update in terms of the terms of each commissioner. Do we want to review that real quickly? So Gamak, Lothar, and Christensen's terms are expiring on August 1st, 2022. Gunther's term is expiring March 1st, 2023. Manoj Thomas's term is expiring January 31st, 2024. And Jim Tilbury's term is expiring January 31st, 2025. Any questions regarding these terms? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. We did have obviously a resignation from the Charter Commission. Dorothy Tice feels like there's other things she'd prefer doing as she's riding towards the sunset. And so I can identify with her to a little bit degree anyway. So we will have a vacancy opening. We have had discussions in the past that we were thinking that we'd like to have an optimum of 9 Charter Commission members. So I think we should just put the invitation out for anybody who would like to make an application to be on the Charter Commission. And we'll see what kind of response we get. And if we have more than one application, we could have some further discussion at that point in time regarding adding more than a replacement for Dorothy. Any comments or conversation about that?
Mr. Chair, just as far as an update I know I talked to you, but for the other commissioners, we will be advertising the vacancy in the January newsletter. And I have it tentatively scheduled for the new council to discuss appointments in March. So that's the timeline we're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from anybody? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to 7C, the annual report to the district judge. And there is a letter that's been submitted on November 19th to Judge Barnett, and listing what has transpired on November 12th, as well as tonight's meeting, and that will be sent after the meeting here. Any comments about that?
And Mr. Chair, just as far as it's a drafted letter, and so either by motion or by consensus, you can just have staff submit that letter. Up to you how you want to handle that. Is that fair, Jess? Is consensus enough? You're muted. Okay.
Okay. So we'll just do it by consensus here. So, and then we don't need any more. Do we need any more discussion of that? I don't think we do we?
Nope.
Okay. So then we need to establish a date for our annual meeting in 2021. Doesn't mean we won't call other meetings, but our annual meeting we usually schedule for later in the year, and we'd like to throw out a date, Thursday, October 14th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. for our annual meeting. Do we have any discussion about that at the present time?
I'll just jump in. Oh, sorry.
The only question I would have is there any merit, it's kind of minor, in doing it later in the year so that your annual report can comprise all of the activities within the year?
You'd like it later than?
Well, no, I'm just posing the question. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer, but it's always seemed odd to me that the annual report that we submit to the chief judge that we're required to do by law, can miss a third of the year, the actual year. So we're reporting on a 12-month period, but it's not a calendar year. But I don't know, Brad or Jessica, if you have any thoughts on that. It's a quirk in the statute, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But the broader question is there any merit for any reason in meeting later in the year than mid-October.
It certainly could. I mean, and our typical thing from the staff level is ideally putting on the same night as another meeting, just because these typically don't last that long. But we can certainly do it any night. We can look up too. I wonder, if we could send this almost retroactively. So if we had the first meeting in 2021, if we couldn't submit the letter at that time too, or just do it at the staff level. So
I'm sorry, we need to identify for the chief judge the date of the next meeting. Is that right?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
know.
so.
That's a great question. I'm not sure if that's required.
The
Well, I
Charter
don't want to
Commission-
create an issue or a question or whatever ambiguity where none needs to be. I mean, we can always reset this if we choose for purposes of, say a working discussion on the ward system to have a meeting earlier in the year. We can always reset that business meeting, I think.
Sure.
So.
Absolutely. And I'll be the first to admit, I have not spent a lot of time on Charter Commission because of everything else going on. So we've kind of just done how we've always done it. I'll put it on the calendar for Jess and I to dig in for the options related to that. And just, I know I have in the enhanced agenda a motion. The chair can just call a meeting too. So this is one of those where you don't necessarily have to take a motion and vote.
And I think, Ken, my preference is to probably, after the census comes in to the city council and everything, my preference would be that I would call a meeting shortly after that information has been presented to the city council, where we can, have further discussion about the ward system and the process, if any, of how we would like to proceed and move forward. And I personally rather have that earlier in the year rather than late in the year, while it's still relatively fresh in our minds and so forth and so forth. So that was something I was thinking of doing anyways, is probably calling a meeting of the Charter Commission after that information has been presented to the city council. And then at that meeting, maybe we could, if we wanted to, we could schedule a meeting later in the year after the 14th of October for our annual meeting.
Well, just to keep things simple, because of the flexibility, I'd be willing to make a motion now to set our statutory annual meeting for Thursday, October 14th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. And if we meet again or so choose at a later date, we can always modify that. But that's my motion.
Okay. Do I have a second to the motion?
I'll second that, Thomas.
Okay, Thomas second. All in favor? Lothar, aye. Christensen,
Aye.
Kamak,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Thomas,
Aye.
and Tilbury.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. And of course, it was just last week that we had a joint meeting with the city council, and the main reason for that was to initiate discussion with the council regarding the ward system. And I just wondered if, since that meeting, was there any additional discussion that any of the members of the Charter Commission would like to entertain or engage in or bring up at this time? Okay, Ken?
I had a couple of thoughts and questions just for purposes of follow-up.
Sure.
And maybe Brad or Jessica could give us all a brief summary of what they felt the follow-up to-dos might have been coming out of that meeting based on their memories that are younger than mine. But one general question, I think, Jessica, maybe you might know this. Do you know when the census data will become available for the city of Corcoran?
I do not know the exact date when the census data will be coming out. Brad might have a better update on that.
Okay.
It's March or April. I don't have the exact date.
Okay, because it kind of leads into maybe part of the point that Brian was raising earlier. And I'll sort of explain that as I go here. The one other question I had before I get to the point or the discussion item was, maybe Brad and Jessica, if you could relate to us, what type of information did you use when you created the 3 precincts out of the previous 2, and not expecting that it might have been particularly specific or detailed or whatever, but clearly you use some sort of information base in creating even a general balance between the voting populations of the precincts. What information, or what was your process in doing that?
Sure, I can jump in on that one. So I worked with our GIS folks from Wink to look at the properties within Corcoran, and then really tried to do a couple of the things. We looked at where population base was, and then tried to where developments were going to be, were coming in where we knew that they were already platted or part of the way platted. So Bellwether, for example, or Ravinia, we knew there was going to be some expansion. So we tried to come up with some divisions on that, knowing that population, especially on the east side, was going to continue to increase. So those were kind of our metrics we were using and working with our GIS to come up with. I think one thing that's especially helpful from an election standpoint and administering elections is understand if to be on streets is helpful when we make those determinations. So then, even numbers or odd numbers, things like that is really helpful. Our previous precinct lines followed the school district lines, which was great, but in some cases it would just follow property lines, which made it kind of confusing in some of the areas. So we just tried to kind of use those guiding principles of trying to have build in some flexibility for growth in a couple areas, and then try to stay along streets and limit our school districts, just because the number of school districts impacts the number of ballots you have to have. So trying to keep all of those in mind.
So here's one other question, and I doubt even anyone on the call might be able to answer this, but this is a question that staff will certainly I would believe would have access to. But the question is, how granular and detailed is the census data from a geographic standpoint? Because I know historically in Corcoran, like Jessica said, we've had the benefit of making sort of our political subdivisions, our precincts, based on school district boundaries, because you don't have the same strict legal standards for creating voting precincts that you do in other cases. But we have had legislative redistricting. And again, we all are familiar with the monkey business, I'll say, that goes on when the legislature redistricts itself. But even given that, they have some level of detail because the districts have to have legally equivalent population, and we know all of the stories about that. But my point is, does staff know, or do we collect it? Does anyone on the call know when we receive that census? Great. Will it have the degree of granularity on a geographic level that will allow us to actually sit down and construct models that we can then use as worksheets as a group to sort of say, this is how wards could look, whether it's 2 wards, 3 wards, 4 wards, or whatever? That's a sort of an open-ended question.
Sure.
George, go ahead.
The census creates what they call census blocks. And those do not always line up exactly on ordinary political subdivision lines. They tend to be grouped based on socioeconomic differences and so forth. So what you could end up with is multiple blocks within the city of Corcoran that do not align with our precincts. To the extent that you can have a block which is totally encased within a police precinct, that's helpful. So we would probably find that we would have several blocks that exist within a precinct, okay? Where the problem comes in is when the census blocks overlap precincts. Then you have to actually have some other method of going in to parse the data that's in that census block to divide it. And so then you get into something that's closer to what Jessica was talking about earlier. So you could probably use census block information to a degree. And then you have to step away from that and begin to do your alignments by maybe splitting census blocks.
Or going back to GIS at that point.
That is true. There's a lot of different systems that you could use. Now you can make assumptions, I think, that you'll have X number of voters per household, and that varies a little bit. It probably, you're going to get some information about the per household, but you have children in the households and they're not going to be voting. So, you have single parent households where you might only have one voter. We can't really make assumptions necessarily that our precincts are going to be that different from one another. So I think as long as we use a logical way of grouping, if we're off by 25 voters in a precinct when we start at the beginning of the 10-year cycle, it's probably not going to be a problem. But if we're off by several hundred, that could be a problem. The way Jessica described it, they were also doing some anticipatory divisions based on planned future increases. And the system that's set up for setting wards doesn't necessarily do that. It pretty much relies upon the census data that has been collected and other information that can be used to further subdivide the existing census data, not based on what might be in the future. So in effect, unless we decide that we're going to look at it every 5 years and try to further refine the census data, we could, over a period of years, get some vastly different sizes. Now, one of the ways to handle that is if we're looking at our entire eastern side of the community as our development area, we can do like they do with the congressional districts and reach into the metro area and then extend out into the rural area so that you get a cross section of representation. So for instance, something like a bellwether would be in one precinct and something like Ravinia would be in another. And anything that is subject to development in those two would probably be divided. So you might look at the alignment a little differently so you'd at least have an opportunity for growth to occur in all 3 or 2 or 4 or how many ever we end up with.
Well, George, and that's part of the reason why I think maybe my sense is, and I would assume that others would share this, that until we get the census data and are able to start making some models, this is all pretty academic. One comment I wanted to make though on the fact that under the board election statutes, you use the census data, which in year 9 of the cycle is 9 years old. On the flip side, we know now where we believe the houses will be built over the next 4 to 5 years, based on the applications that have been submitted. And that's all well and good. And I think maybe on the flip side of the argument about the census data is that's where we've either given some degree of preliminary approval or final approval, but the houses haven't been built. And we saw in 2007 that we had approvals for a lot of houses that never got built in this city. And obviously that was due to a significant economic downturn. And we're going to hope that that doesn't occur, you know, in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But from a broader sense, you know, I don't know that we can speculate now how many houses will be built 8 or 9 years out in the area north of 30 and west of, say, 116. And, you know, we're going to assume that the houses are going to be in the MUSA boundary, but we don't know that those will actually be constructed. But again, that's all pretty academic stuff at this point.
Is there a like an algorithm or something that is used to when 500 houses are going to be built or 1,000 houses are going to be built? Do they just automatically put 2 voters in per household, or what's the approach to things like that?
Well, the census data will actually include the voting age population. So,
Okay.
you know, they'll be able to figure out the numbers per household, but in an actual count, they're counting adults, and they're counting children, and they're counting
Right.
groups.
But it's,
So we actually have
it's important to remember, though, when you create the wards, it's not based on voters, it's based on population, and those are 2 different things. So frankly, we're going to have more small household populations in the north and western part of Corcoran, where we have, say, 2 voters, empty nesters, and then in southeastern Corcoran, I don't know if people are still having more than 2 or 3 kids, but we're going to have more houses there where the population within the home is actually 5 people.
And so the wards aren't based on voters, it's based on total population.
Right.
Yes.
Ah, okay. Okay. Manoj.
Yep. Making sure I'm not on mute. Yeah, so I had a question, Jessica, and this is, if any you can answer with respect to timeline. So we obviously have to structure each ward to have as close as we can get to from a population size. But what timing are we targeting? Is it as on date when the ward gets established? Because as you get the census data next year, right? And the rate at which homes are being built in both at Belvedere and Ravinia, you know that you're going to have in the next 2 years of growth. And assuming we get on a ballot as a question, and this is me just being speculative at this point in time, but I want to try to get to a timeline of what do we forecast or try to achieve. You said, okay, we are going to look at 2024 for the vote system because 2022 is going to be the ballot question. So I'm trying to project to the population that will be on point on 2024, because I'm assuming for what it has to be that close. You can't project 10 years out and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to do project it out for that long. Is that accurate? Is my understanding a point?
My understanding with the wards is that we have to base it on the census data. That generally is what we base it on. In terms of the timeline, the districts get, with the census, everything gets redistricted in 2022. So that is when we'll, is kind of when it would go into effect. If we want to put it on a ballot, 2022 would be the next, unless we were to do a special election, which if raises some other things that we certainly could do, but 2022 would be the next time we put it on there. And then after that, yes, it'd be 2024 when we'd actually implement it, if we were going to do a ballot question.
And so the population at that time, we would still use census and not what we would have as a city population in 2024. Is that accurate?
I believe so, but I would want to verify with our city attorney that I'm not missing something.
You know, so
it's just that
the,
we model now, we have to look at 2024 rather, right? So we'll have to take some of the good projections, but then we have to revalidate that just before we implement it, because that's the action. Can't be playing with projections when we implement in 2024. But modeling now, we'll have to start looking at 2024 when we model. So it's a bit of both, which is why I bought it. The other question I had for you, this is more, I think, staff, is now that, you know, we'll have school districts, multiple school districts on the ballot, and there's a potential that, you know, with the Senate lines being redrawn, right? I mean, I was talking to some state reps, and they're like, we don't even know if Jerry and David is going to be our rep going forward. Like, we don't know what could happen with the census data and how the lines are going to be drawn. So how complicated would the ballots be for us with all these permutations and combinations, with the wards and school districts, and do we have a potential of the city being divided across multiple districts?
So right now we have precincts that are our precincts have different school districts. So we would have, so it kind of depends on how how the words are drawn and things like that. That would potentially impact if there are different wards in different school districts, we have different ballots. So it just kind of depends on how everything would come out. We currently have 8 different ballots for Corcoran, and we've had 8 ballots since I've been here. We lessened that by going to the 3 precincts. We were able to get down to 3 ballots for each of the at max for them, but it varies, and it would depend on kind of the complexity of our system.
Maybe I'll rephrase the question. How do we even care, right? I know that ballots, we have more ballots now, right? And that's more of an administrative work, and we kind of put it on the staff and what needs to happen there. But from an execution standpoint, what are we looking at with more complications coming in, or we don't even care at that point? Judge.
Yeah,
George,
the difference between what we have now and what we would have under a ward system would be negligible, so long as the wards and the precincts were aligned the same way. So we would still have the issue of trying to follow a boundary wherever possible, a school district boundary wherever possible. But I think, to answer Manoj's question, it's probably no more complex than what it is now.
Fair. I just wanted to know. I was curious how this is going to shape.
So
the other, I had a question, and maybe Ken, you found some of this out in some of your research, but like you mentioned, we could be 9 years out from the census, and our population be not at all closely representative of what they may have been at the beginning in terms of the wards. So in light of, let's say, a population explosion in certain areas or what have you, what are the obligations that we have as a city to change the wards prior to the next census?
yeah, I think the reading that I've done on it indicates that there is not necessarily an obligation to change until the next census. The question to ask the city attorney is, how much changing can we do to the wards in between, and what methodology would be acceptable to make changes in between the census periods? So that's a legal question, I think, because that's something that we need to get clarification. Ken's got maybe a response to that.
Yeah, so it's interesting, in the ward statutes themselves, there's an allowance for modification of wards based on population change, but that only occurs for cities of the first class.
Okay.
So when the legislature, whenever they set up the statute, the statutes creating the possibility of wards, obviously the debate was had. And I don't have the legislative history, so I can't really speak to that, but I would conclude that at that time they felt that for political units smaller than cities of the first class, it wouldn't be controversial or they didn't care. But we don't know the answer to that. But yeah, like I say, I don't think, oh, I'm sorry, it came back to me. I actually considered the question, George, earlier, and one possibility, let's say if we look at a 10-year cycle, and we'll just call 2021 as year 1, and then we go all the way out to year 0 being the census year again. And let's kind of walk through this scenario. Let's say that there was a ward structure that, say, the city council thought was appropriate, and the city council decided to unanimously adopt that charter amendment and put that in place so that it applied to the 2022 election. Okay. And we go forward, we start with wards 2022, 2024, 2026. We get into that 8 years period, and all of a sudden we realize we've got this huge imbalance in population, and it's pretty hard to argue that it's still a fair system. My one thought would be at that point, and it would be difficult to do, but if you can redraw ward boundaries, you re-amend the charter, the city council adopts that new amendment, and that's how you redraw the boundaries at that point.
So can you explain, and maybe Brad and Jessica could weigh in on this, but we get to that point, we recognize that there is an imbalance. So what is then the actual procedure of redistricting wards, shall we say? Redefining where the wards are. Who initiates that? Is that something that the Charter Commission is part of? Is that something that just the City Council does, or is it done on a staff level? What's the process?
Well, because it's a charter amendment, Brian, it can arise through any of the mechanisms that can result in a charter amendment. So, and frankly, one of the ways that it could occur is if there's an area of the city with a big population that feels it's underrepresented, they do a citizen petition to re-amend the charter. But I think that the amendment would not be to simply reallocate population among the existing wards. The petition would be to say increase the number of wards or decrease the number of wards, thereby forcing you to reallocate population anew.
Okay.
But would you still have to go back to 8-year-old census data to do that? I just don't know the answer to that question.
But is the only way for that to actually be brought up is by petition?
Well,
or is it something that, let's say, the Charter Commission or the staff or the City Council, we've just intuitively, we recognize that there is an imbalance and an injustice going on here, and we want to correct that. Does it still only come by petition, or does it come by other means as well?
I would assume it would come by Charter Commission agenda item. Charter commissioners themselves, assuming we have balanced representation of the Charter Commission, Charter commissioners are going to say, this isn't right. It needs to be addressed.
Sure. Okay.
Mr. Chairley, one thing I'd like to look into of whether it could be in the charter amendment itself, that whereas if changes by X%, the Charter Commission has to redistrict versus waiting for a petition. The problem with that is how you write it. If it's on percentage wise, well, then if it triggers it 2 years before you're going to do the census anyway, do you really want to go twice, amend the wards when you're going to have to do it 2 years down the road anyway? So I'm sure there's ways to word whatever you want, but it'd be nice probably to have a trigger automatically in the charter versus having to wait on politics or petitions to play it out, or it doesn't happen. But that's just a thought.
Sure. No.
Brad, I had, so I was going through your memo that, the memo that you sent out asking for what the staff should do, the guidance, the 5 things that came out of the packet. And there's one of the things on there that triggered a memory from our session with the joint session with the council, which, about gathering for information. So I don't know if that's a priority, but what I would like to see, and I don't know if that's already being worked on or if it's something we can, is to look at when look in our state, right? So look in our state on cities that have ward system. When did they adopt? At what? If we can get some background on that to kind of make sure that we are on the right track and we're not maybe, while this is something that's important to do from a city representation standpoint, I don't want to be trigger happy on it, right? To get it way too early before we need when the city is going to dramatically change over the next 10 years. So the timing is also important. So we need to figure out what are, irrespective of size, right? Plymouth, I don't care, like every city that is at least in the metros, when did they adopt something like this at what population? That's the information that will be useful for us to understand if we are in the vicinity of most cities.
Yeah, and we started looking at that a little bit, and we can certainly pull that together again. I don't think we compiled anything specifically. I know Jessica looked at some nationwide stuff as far as numbers too, but it's pretty easy to get those questions answered. So I just made a note of it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think, again, from my perspective, but I'd like to get maybe a poll from all of you commissioners here tonight. But obviously, we can't really talk about this stuff outside of an open meeting. And so even tonight with, you know, a little bit of discussion here, more things kind of get fleshed out. And I think there are probably still more questions that we don't even know need to be asked about this and how, as we're moving forward. And those questions only arise when we are able to actually have discussion together about it. So my preference personally is that we actually have another meeting. I just say sooner rather than later in the, you know, in 2021. And by sooner, I don't mean January, February, but I think it would be good for the council to get, you know, some of the census data and so forth. And then we'd have a few more bits of information to kind of fill in the blanks. And like you said, Ken, get some potential working models out of that. But for me, my preference would be, because I still think there needs to be a lot more discussion on this moving forward. Even if we all would be in agreement that we think the ward system is a direction to go, I still think there needs to be a lot of discussion about how do we do it, when do we do it, and all of those kind of things. And I think we need more information that time will give us. But seeing as we can't actually talk about this stuff other than with maybe one person on the Charter Commission, I just feel like it puts us to some degree at a disadvantage of really collectively being able to pick each other's brains on this thing. And so, you know, I'm probably going to want to call a meeting, you know, sometime earlier in the year rather than later in the year to revisit this. So I'm just letting you know where I'm landing on this right now. Ken?
Would it be more productive then if we wait until we receive the census information and everybody can take a look at it? That would be one step farther down the road.
Yeah.
It might result in a more specific, sort of detailed set of questions for staff to research.
Right. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think maybe what I would ask of all of us as Charter Commission members is, as we're pondering this over the next few months, let's write our questions down. You know, let's kind of bring to the let's not just set this on the back burner for the next 4 or 5 months, and then we get the information, and then we take an hour to resurrect. Oh, what were we talking? You know, I mean, let's kind of keep it a little bit. I don't want to say stir the pot, I guess, but let's keep the embers glowing a little bit on this as we move forward. George.
Can we formalize that a little bit and maybe ask that if anybody develops any lists of questions or gets any new information that they forward it to you as chair and copy Brad?
Yeah.
And Jessica, whichever you prefer in the city hall, whoever's going to be taking care of it, but just so that we get it ready, so that at the point in time when we're going to schedule a meeting, we can develop an agenda around that.
Right, and that information can be passed on to all the commissioners before the meeting. So Ken.
And I'll go back and sort of express a concern that I always had in previous years, and George and I have had this conversation on the council in previous years, and that is that we use staff wisely in this. What we don't want to do is send staff down a rat hole and burn up a lot of time on something that's not going to gain traction. So I think it's like, I want to support Brian's comments, and George, it's incumbent on us to make sure that we're efficient in the way that we approach this and how we test staff. Because frankly, I don't think there's a city budget item for Charter Commission unless the commission itself goes back to the council and requests a budget, which it's never done, frankly. And I'm not advocating for that either. So I think it just goes to the point that we have to come up with a way for a very, I would say, less formal governing body within the city to be very efficient in how it uses resources.
Right. I think I agree with you, Ken. And, you know, if we look at forwarding it, it's simply to put it in a folder and not do anything with it, because I think we don't want to get into a situation where any one of us is giving direction to the staff to do anything with it. I think
Right.
we wait until the next meeting.
Right. I think, you know, if we can kind of be thought of as gathering information and disseminating that information to each other, I think that's, especially if it's done by email and so forth, then to everybody, then that's, I think it'll help us be more prepared for the next time we have a discussion about it. And, you know, I mean, I try to be very careful about open meeting laws, and they're there for a reason, but it does at times handicap us from being able to kind of pick each other's brains on this topic and other topic actually moving forward, so that we can truly have every door opened and every rock kicked over, so that when we make a decision, it will be thoroughly, you know, vetted. And so
what you're describing, Brian, is basically something like a hub and spoke situation where the individuals that are on the commission might send theirs centrally to a staff person who would then push them back out, either at the same time or periodically, so that we could have that. But again, that gets around the open meeting issue in that it's being communicated from staff back out rather than between individuals.
Yeah. Manoj.
So regarding the early meeting, I think, you know, Kenneth George makes a good point that we wait for census data for the next meeting, because that'll be a little bit more pointed. We get a chance to kind of deep dive into it. But I would also say, like, you know, timeline like June would give the new commissioner on to come on March to kind of catch up, so that we, you know, they kind of hit the road running in that meeting. Keep that in mind, that we have a vacancy so by March.
Yeah. Well put. So Brad, if you could, and or Jessica, communicate with us when the census information comes and get that to us, then I can call a meeting, you know, after that. And it'll be, I think it makes sense to wait for the census information. And then usually, what is it, 30 days or something that we need to give notification for a meeting or something like that? So, no?
No, it's typically 3 days. The day you call it doesn't count. The day well, depends how you do the math, but the day you call the meeting doesn't count, but the day of the meeting does count.
All right.
So.
All right. Okay.
Brian's got a lot of time on his hands. He thinks in terms of 30-day time periods.
No, I have no time on my hand. That's why everything is pushed out for 30 days. All right. Any other thoughts on the ward system before we move forward here? Okay, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is adjournment. So unless, do we have any specific direction to give the Charter Commission other than just to, you know, when the council gets the census information, pass it on to us? Is anything else? No, I didn't think so. Okay, good. So do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? George? And do I have a second? Manoj? Okay, all in favor? Lothar, aye. Tilbury?
Aye.
Gamak?
Aye.
Gunther?
All right.
Christensen? Thomas?
Aye.
Well, the motion carries. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep,
Everyone have a
welcome.
great Thanksgiving holiday.
Yes, be safe.